Morning, folks. This is the third video regarding depression and addiction and the healing process. So the questions today that I thought would be asked are: one, if you believe that you have little control of your life, then what do you think controls your life? Okay, that's the first question. The second question is, what is your core belief? Okay. But before I want to answer those questions, I want to give an opening statement here. One of the core factors in battling depression is understanding it. If a person doesn't understand it, which I didn't, I had no understanding of it at all, there's no way to fight it. There's no way to battle it. There's forces against there was forces against me that prevented me from being able to reason with myself and cope with what was happening. So the healing process began with trying to understand what was going on. And the other thing is, I began to understand and seek out what was happening, I was able to forgive other people, forgive myself, and forgive certain situations and understand situations that brought me to this place, brought me into depression and anxiety and addiction. So the core of fighting depression is understanding it. First question. If you believe that you have little control of your life, then what controls it? Okay, well, logically, we have to agree that we are forced to exist. So, in my mind, existence is the controlling force. Existence includes everything. Everything that we are surrounded by, everything that has formed us, where we were born, who our parents were, the education that we received, the environment that we exist in, and all of the things that we are exposed to. Part of existence, and it is what has controlled the kind of person I became. This is only a logical look at how I became me. I was exposed to things early in my life that was extremely negative, very unhealthy to my intellect, and at that time there was no way for me to understand those things, so I automatically became a victim of the circumstances in which my environment placed me in. Okay. Now, in saying that, okay, everybody that I knew, all the people who surrounded me and raised me and loved me are faced with the same conditions. They are formed by their environment. Therefore, I can let go of blame. If people are in the same circumstances in which I was in, where I cannot understand the conditions that made me the kind of person I am, then how can I place blame on people who I was surrounded by that were under the same conditions? So the choice was made not to hold any blame on anybody. And that relieves, doing that relieves me of a huge burden. So, I don't need to blame my father. I don't need to blame my mother. I don't need to blame my siblings. I don't need to blame my friends. I don't need to blame anybody. I need to understand. So I need to understand what caused me to be the kind of person I was. So that's what controls. Now, if you want to go beyond that, you can. What force placed everybody in existence and in the environment in which they were formed? There has to be a force greater than human beings. That force, to me, is what I call God. It's the only word that I can use to describe a force larger than me, larger than the human race, so it's got to be God. Therefore, I had to come to a realization that God was the only place to go for healing, for complete understanding. And that's what I did. And when I tell you that I had very little belief in God beforehand, before the depression set in and the anxiety and the fears and the chaos, I'm telling you, I didn't have much belief in God. There was a little. My mother was a religious person and had some faith. I did not. My dad was an atheist. So there was a conflict about that within me. But, the saying that there are no atheists in foxholes, well, there is not in my case. When I started losing control of myself and dealing with horrendous anxiety and panic attacks and stuff, I had no choice but to. I was desperate. I started looking anywhere for relief, because you're afraid. I was just terrified. Couldn't understand what was happening to me. There was a consciousness that understood that something was wrong. Something very bad was wrong. So I began to seek out guidance from God, that which is bigger than me. So, I discussed that process previously. I reached out to ministers and preachers and Catholic priests and spiritual guidance through books and scripture and everything that I could possibly find. So the next question is, what is your core belief? What is my core belief? I believe that I was created. I believe that everything is created. Every person, every aspect of creation is creation by God, something beyond my capacity to understand. Big truck going by. And I believe that creation is always in play. It's always in motion. Creation is not, it doesn't cease. It continues forever. So then the other question that would naturally be asked is why? Why am I created? Why are human beings created? And why in this very disturbing environment where death exists, where hostility and hatred and love and all of that exists? And you know, this is perception coming from me, from my own philosophical way of thinking. Something that seems logical and makes sense to me. The part of me that asks these questions is larger than the part of me that exists only for a short time and dies. So I think the part that asks the question, why am I here, is the part that exists forever. It's my permanent intellect, my essence of being. It's me. It's my identity. It is who I am. Who I am asks the question, why am I here? I've asked this question, you know, in meditation, in prayer, whatever, you know. I've seek the answer in literature and from people who I believed at the time, who I believed were wiser than me and understood. But the answer is that I am created to grow into something that I do not yet know what is to be. That's the only thing that makes sense. This existence in human form is part of that growth experience. Being forced to exist in a body that is that needs maintenance, that has to be cared for, that has limitations, a body that, you know, I mean, you live in a body, you know, you understand. It's very dependent. And the other thing is, you know, I was given emotions and feelings, love and hatred and judgment and guilt and desire and want. And you have to ask the question, okay, you have to ask yourself this question. If you have trouble believing in something bigger than you, why on earth, why in the universe do we have these powerful emotions that love and hate and can become depressed and very insecure? Why do they exist if there is nothing beyond this life? Why? Man, it doesn't make sense. If there's love and hate, then there has to be a reason, and there has to be an after. There has to be something bigger than this. So, I'm reading my notes here, stand by. So, to recap, I believe that everyone is placed here to grow, and that we are already in eternity. It's just that we can't feel it.